My family kicked me out because I refused to throw away my grandfather's old film projector and reels. That ancient film projector changed everything. Not just because it was my inheritance from Grandpa Michael, but because it became the physical manifestation of the divide between me and my family. I never thought I'd be standing on our driveway at midnight, clutching a rusty piece of Hollywood history, while my own flesh and blood stared at me like I was insane. Let me back up. I'm Tim Harlow, from Bakersfield, California, a place where dreams go to get practical jobs in oil fields or agriculture. I grew up in a family that valued stability over passion, security over risk, and tradition over innovation. My parents worked their entire lives at the same companies. Dad at an accounting firm, Mom as a school administrator. They had a mortgage, sensible cars, and retirement plans. The American dream, suburban edition. But I had Grandpa Michael. Grandpa wasn't like the rest of the family. In the 1950s, while everyone else was settling into post-war conformity, he was hauling equipment around Hollywood as a camera assistant. He wasn't a big shot, just a working stiff who helped capture magic on celluloid. But man, the stories he told when we'd sit on his porch during those long summer evenings. Jimmy Stewart? Nicest guy you'd ever meet. Brought donuts for the crew every Thursday. Hitchcock was a nightmare to work with, but man, he sure knew exactly what he wanted. My family would roll their eyes. Dad would mutter about embellishment, while Mom would shoot me warning glances not to get too caught up in fantasies. My Uncle Rick was the worst, always snorting and saying things like, if Michael was such a big shot in Hollywood, why'd he end up fixing TVs in Bakersfield? But I saw the light in Grandpa's eyes when he talked about those days. That wasn't the look of a man spinning yarns. It was a glow of someone who had touched something magical, even if just for a moment. When I was 15, I started making short films of my friends using a beat-up digital camera I bought working weekends at Target. Nothing special, just goofy horror spoofs and skateboarding videos. But Grandpa Michael watched every single one. He'd offer suggestions about framing, lighting, and pacing that seemed to come from another world compared to YouTube tutorials I was following. It's not about the equipment, Timmy, he'd say. It's about what you see and how you make others see it too. By senior year, I knew what I wanted. Film school, USC or UCLA if I could swing it. My guidance counselor was supportive, pointing out my solid GPA and the strength of my portfolio. I even got an honorable mention at a regional student film festival for a documentary I made about local farmers affected by the drought. The only people not on board? My family. Film school? That's not a real education, Tim. Dad said over dinner, not even looking up from his meatloaf. Do you know how many kids chase that Hollywood dream and end up waiting tables? Mom added, her voice that special mix of concern and disappointment she perfected over the years. Uncle Rick, who always seemed to be at our house for dinner despite having his own family, laughed so hard he nearly choked on his beer. Hollywood? Jesus, kid, you might as well tell them you want to be an astronaut or a cowboy. I tried explaining the statistics, the job prospects in the expanding digital media landscape, the growing demand for content creation. They weren't hearing it. In our family, you went to state college for something practical, got a job with benefits, and saved for retirement. End of story. That's when Grandpa got sick. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and merciless. Within 3 months of diagnosis, he was gone. At the funeral, the family spoke about his reliability, his work ethic, his devotion as a husband and father. No one mentioned his time in Hollywood. It was like they were eulogizing a stranger. I sat in the back row, a knot in my throat, wondering if anyone really knew him at all. A week later, I got a call from Grandpa's attorney. He'd left me something in his will. The projector was a Kodak Analyst II from the early 1950s, a bulky, industrial-looking thing with a hand crank and a dented metal case. Along with it came 5 metal containers of 16 millimeters film, each labeled with dates from 1952 to 1955. No titles, no description. Just dates. Mom wrinkled her nose when I brought them home. That old junk? What are you going to do with it? Dad looked annoyed, as if Grandpa had deliberately saddled me with trash they'd have to deal with. There's nowhere to even develop film like that anymore, Tim. Uncle Rick, of course, had the most to say. Your grandpa lived in a fantasy world, and now he's trying to drag you into it too. You should be thinking about college applications, not playing with ancient history. I set the projector up in the garage anyway. It took me 2 days to figure out how to thread the film properly and get the bulb working. The first reel was from May 1952. As the projector whirred to life and images flickered on the white sheet I'd hung on the wall, my heart nearly stopped. It was behind-the-scenes footage from a movie set, not just any set. I recognized it immediately from my film history class. Singing in the Rain. There was Gene Kelly, in between takes, laughing with the crew. Donald O'Connor practicing a fall. Debbie Reynolds being shown a dance move by a choreographer. And occasionally, when someone was holding the camera for him, there was Grandpa Michael, young, confident, clearly right at home among Hollywood royalty. I couldn't wait to show my family. This wasn't just some old man's tall tales. This was proof. Proof that Grandpa had been exactly who he said he was. Proof that dreams like mine weren't ridiculous. I invited them all to the garage for a special screening. Dad came reluctantly. Mom looked worried, and Uncle Rick rolled his eyes but followed along, probably just to have something new to criticize. The footage rolled. Gene Kelly smiled and waved. A young Debbie Reynolds blew a kiss to the camera. Silence from my audience. Then, so what? He was an errand boy who happened to stand near famous people. Uncle Rick snorted. Tim, this doesn't change anything, Dad said. Your grandfather had his chance at that life and ended up fixing TVs in Bakersfield. Take the hint. My blood boiled. He was part of cinema history. He worked on classics. How can you not see how amazing this is? Mom put her hand on my shoulder in that patronizing way that made me feel 5 years old. Honey, we're just trying to protect you from disappointment. And honestly, Dad continued, his voice hardening, this junk is taking up space. Either it goes, or you need to find somewhere else to store it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This isn't junk. This is Grandpa's legacy. To me specifically, he wanted me to have it. Dad's face turned to stone. You need to grow up, Tim. You're 18 now. It's time to think about your future, not play with toys from past. Either this goes in the trash, Dad gestured at the projector and film canisters, or you need to find somewhere else for you in it. Uncle Rick nodded in agreement. Your father's right, Tim. Time to join the real world. Mom didn't say a word, but her eyes said everything. I was embarrassing them. I was being unreasonable. I was a problem. Without thinking, I grabbed the projector and the film canisters, stormed past them to my room, and threw some clothes and essentials into my backpack. When I came back to the garage, they were still standing there, looking shocked that I was actually leaving. You're not just betraying me, I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. You're betraying him too. Grandpa believed in me, even if none of you do. I walked out the front door with a projector under one arm and my hastily packed bag over my shoulder. The night air hit my face, cool and indifferent to my family drama. I had $237 in my bank account, a car with a quarter tank of gas, and nowhere specific to go. But as I stood there on the driveway, holding that battered old projector like it was a newborn, a strange calm came over me. Grandpa Michael had left me more than just some old film equipment. He'd left me a mystery, one that my family was too blind to see. What if these films weren't just mementos? What if there was something in them, something important that only I was meant to find? Something that could change everything? The thought sent a shiver down my spine as I loaded the projector and films into my car. Whatever secrets these old reels held, I was determined to uncover them, with or without my family's support. Little did I know, I was driving straight into a Hollywood mystery that had been buried for over half a century. I didn't have many options with a bulky film projector under my arm and nowhere to go, but I knew exactly who might take me in. Josh Wilson had been my best friend since 3rd grade when he shared his Lunchables with me after mine got squashed in my backpack. The kind of friend who'd let you crash at his place without asking too many questions. His apartment was only 15 minutes from my parents' house, but it felt like crossing into another dimension. I pulled into the cracked driveway of the small rental he shared with two other guys from community college. The porch light flickered like it was sending Morse code warnings as I knocked, still balancing the projector against my hip. When Josh opened the door, hair sticking up like he'd been electrocuted, wearing boxers and a faded Nirvana t-shirt, his eyes went from my face to projector to my hastily packed bag. "Dude, are you filming the next Terminator in my garage or something?" he asked with that crooked smile of his. I managed a weak smile back. Maybe something even cooler. That was all it took. No lengthy explanations needed. That's why Josh was Josh. He just nodded and held the door open wider. "Mi casa es your refugee camp," he said, grabbing my bag. "Dave and Mike are out of town this weekend, so the living room couch is all yours. But fair warning, it smells like Mountain Dew and broken dreams." Josh's place looked like what would happen if a comic book store and a Taco Bell had a baby that nobody cleaned up after. Pizza boxes formed precarious towers. Gaming controllers snaked across the floor like plastic serpents. Posters of bands I'd never heard of covered water stains on the walls. But the garage, that was the real treasure. Josh's roommates used it for band practice, which meant it had decent lighting, and even some soundproofing foam haphazardly stapled to the walls. A broken drum set sat in one corner, and various amps created an electronic jungle in another. "Welcome to your personal Paramount Pictures," Josh announced, sweeping his arm across the cluttered space. "It's no Hollywood, but it's yours for as long as you need it." I set the projector down on a wobbly card table, carefully arranging the film canisters beside it. "This is perfect, man. Seriously." Josh leaned against the doorframe. "So, family drama or midlife crisis? You're kind of young for the second one, but you've always been an overachiever." I gave him the condensed version. Grandpa's inheritance. My family's ultimatum. The door hitting me on the way out. Josh listened without interrupting, which was unusual for him. "Your dad's always been intense," he finally said. "But kicking you out over some old movies? That's next-level parenting fail." That night, we ordered Chinese food and talked about everything except my situation. Josh caught me up on his community college adventures, his terrible date with a girl from his sociology class, and his plans to transfer to a 4-year school eventually. Normal stuff. Stuff that reminded me the world was still spinning despite my personal drama. I crashed on the couch that night, using my jacket as a blanket, the film canisters sitting on the coffee table like silent witnesses to my exile. Before drifting off, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Mom. No messages. No texts. Just calls I wasn't ready to return. Morning brought clarity and purpose. I needed a job ASAP. No way I could crash at Josh's indefinitely without contributing. But first, I needed to see what was on those reels. Not just the one I'd already viewed at my parents' house. The others. The mystery ones. Josh had morning classes, so I had the place to myself. I set up the projector in the garage, using an old sheet I found in the laundry pile as a screen. The projector had worked at home, but the bumpy ride in my car and being hastily packed hadn't done it any favors. The first attempt was a disaster. The bulb made a popping sound, then died. The film jammed in the feed, creating a sound like a cat being strangled. Smoke started curling from somewhere inside the machine just as Josh walked in. "Whoa. Tim, are you trying to burn my house down? My security deposit is already hanging by a thread." I frantically unplugged the projector, using my beanie to swat at the small wisps of smoke. "Sorry, I think this thing needs some TLC before it's operational." Josh peered at the ancient machine. "You think? This looks like something from a museum or a crime scene." He was right. The projector had definitely seen better days. But I wasn't giving up. After Josh left for his afternoon shift at GameStop, I got to work. YouTube is a miracle for the mechanically challenged. 3 tutorial videos, and 5 hours later, I had the projector partly disassembled on the garage floor. The problem was obvious once I got inside: decades of dust, a frayed wire, and a bulb that should have been replaced during the Nixon administration. I made a parts list and headed to the nearest electronics store, dropping nearly half my savings on replacements. The guy at the counter looked at me like I was building a time machine. "You know they make digital projectors now, right?" he said, scanning a specialized bulb that cost more than my phone bill. "It's a restoration project," I replied, not wanting to get into the whole story. Back at Josh's, I worked through the night. My hands were covered in grease. My eyes burned from strain, and I consumed enough caffeine to power a small country. But around 3 a.m., the motor hummed to life. The light glowed steady and bright. The feeding mechanism worked smoothly. "It's alive!" I shouted to the empty garage, feeling like Dr. Frankenstein, but with better intentions. I fell asleep right there on the concrete floor, using an old couch cushion as a pillow. Small victories. Josh woke me up by nudging my ribs with his foot. "Either you're dead or you had a breakthrough. The lack of burning smells suggests the latter." I sat up, wiping drool from my chin. "It works. We can watch the films now." Josh's eyebrows shot up. "We?" As in, I'm invited to this exclusive screening of your grandfather's home movies? "Front row seats," I confirmed, "as soon as it gets dark enough in here." We spent the day preparing. Josh cleared enough space for 2 folding chairs. I carefully cleaned each reel, following instructions from a film preservation website. We even made popcorn, though Josh's microwave made it smell faintly of the burritos he usually heated in it. As the sun began to set, we closed the garage door and hung blackout curtains over the small windows. The anticipation was building. What would we see? More behind-the-scenes Hollywood moments like the Sing in the Rain footage I'd already shown my family? Family memories? Random footage that meant something only to Grandpa? The first reel I decided to watch again was the one from Sing in the Rain, the only one I'd viewed back home. It still amazed me. Gene Kelly rehearsing dance steps, Debbie Reynolds laughing with crew members, Donald O'Connor making faces at camera. Josh was appropriately impressed. "Your grandpa actually shot this?" "Like for real?" he asked wide-eyed. I nodded. He was there. He was part of it. The next reel was a disappointment, though. 10 minutes of Grandpa's sister Marge showing off her prize-winning apple pie at some county fair in 1953. Josh tried to look interested, but failed miserably. "Maybe she was famous in pie circles?" he offered weakly. The second reel wasn't much better. Grandpa filming himself mowing the lawn, occasionally waving at the camera. Riveting stuff. The third reel showed California farmland, endless fields shot from a moving car, occasionally zooming in on workers or irrigation systems. "Dude," Josh said after the third reel finished, "I hate to say it, but 3 of these 5 reels aren't exactly Spielberg material. Your family might have had a point about some of this being, pretty boring stuff." I felt my stomach sink. What if most of this was just sentimental junk? What if I'd thrown away my relationship with my family over 1 good reel of Hollywood footage and a bunch of boring home movies? 4 reels down, 1 to go. It sat in its metal canister, unlabeled except for a date, August 1954. No description. Nothing to indicate what might be on it. Last chance for cinematic glory. Josh said, reaching for more popcorn. I loaded the film with care, my expectations at rock bottom. The projector whirred to life, light beaming onto our makeshift screen. Static, jumpy frames. Then clarity. A woman appeared, her back to the camera, at first. Blonde hair carefully styled in that unmistakable 1950s way. She turned, and both Josh and I stopped breathing. She looked exactly like Marilyn Monroe. Not someone who resembled her. Not an impersonator. It was her. That smile, that face known worldwide. She was adjusting what looked like a casual summer dress, laughing at something someone off-camera had said. "Holy, is that really her?" Josh whispered, leaning forward. So far he nearly fell off his chair. I couldn't speak. The footage continued. Marilyn, if it really was her, moving around what looked like a private garden. No movie set visible. No other actors. Just her, relaxed, candid, occasionally glancing at the camera with a smile that didn't seem performed for millions of fans but shared with a friend. The quality was remarkable. Clearly professional equipment, not a typical home movie camera. The framing was deliberate, artistic even. My grandfather's work, without a doubt. Tim, Josh finally said, his voice still hushed like we were in church. If that's genuine footage of Marilyn Monroe that's never been seen before, do you have any idea what that could be worth? The film ran for about 15 minutes before ending abruptly. We sat in silence as the projector clicked emptily, the light still shining on the now blank sheet. My mind was racing. Grandpa Michael had filmed Marilyn Monroe in what appeared to be a private setting, not on a movie set, not at a public event, somewhere personal. The footage felt intimate, not in a scandalous way, but in its casualness, like he had been invited into her private world. We need to find out if this is real, I finally said. Josh nodded enthusiastically. And if it is, we need to figure out what the heck your grandpa was doing with Marilyn Monroe in some random garden in 1954. I carefully rewound the film and stored it back in its canister. This wasn't just some old Hollywood memorabilia anymore. This was potentially a historical artifact, and possibly the key to a story about my grandfather that no one in my family knew. There's more to this, I said, more to myself than to Josh. The other reels seemed random, but what if they're not? What if there's a connection we're missing? Josh looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. I think your life just changed frames, my friend. I nodded, feeling something I hadn't felt since before Grandpa died. Purpose. Whatever this mystery was, I was going to solve it for Grandpa Michael, for myself, and maybe, just maybe, to show my family exactly what they dismissed as junk. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a Hollywood mystery that would lead me places I never imagined, and put me in the crosshairs of people who do anything to keep the past buried. The discovery of potential Marilyn Monroe footage changed everything. I sat in Josh's garage the next morning, staring at the unassuming metal film canister like it contained nuclear codes. This wasn't just some family memento anymore. If authentic, this could be my ticket to film school, to a career, to proving my family wrong about everything. We need to verify this, I told Josh over breakfast. If you could call stale Fruit Loops and Mountain Dew breakfast. How? Josh asked through a mouthful of neon cereal. It's not like we can Google, is my grandpa's secret Marilyn Monroe film real? He had a point. But I remembered someone who might help. Mr. Green ran the last remaining movie theater in our town. The Starlight, a single-screen relic that somehow survived the multiplex invasion. He'd been a projectionist since the Kennedy administration and knew more about film than anyone I'd ever met. If anyone could verify what we had, it would be him. I called ahead, then carefully packed the projector and the Marilyn reel. Josh offered to drive, which was good because my hands were shaking too much to handle a steering wheel. The Starlight was closed on Mondays, but Mr. Green let us in through the back entrance. He was exactly as I remember from childhood, tall, rail-thin, with wispy white hair that seemed to float around his head like a dandelion. Timothy Harlow, he said, squinting at me through thick glasses. Your grandfather used to bring you to the matinees. Kid's ticket, even when you were too old for it. I smiled at the memory. He loved this place. Mr. Green's projection booth was a temple to analog cinema. Film canisters lined the walls. Vintage movie posters covered every available surface. The air smelled of celluloid and popcorn. We set up our projector next to the professional one, which made ours look like a child's toy. I explained the situation as he examined the reel with gloved hands, handling it with the reverence of a priest with sacred text. Michael never mentioned knowing Monroe, he mused, inspecting the film leader. But he didn't talk much about his Hollywood days. When the footage played on the theater screen, larger and clearer than our garage sheet, Mr. Green watched in complete silence, occasionally making small noises in his throat. When it ended, he removed his glasses and polished them slowly. Well, I asked, my heart pounding. It looks authentic, he said carefully. The film stock is period correct. The framing is professional. And that certainly looks like Monroe. My breath caught. So it's real? I'm not an expert on Marilyn Monroe specifically, he cautioned. But this doesn't look like any publicly available footage I've seen. The question is, What was your grandfather doing filming her in what appears to be a private setting? That was the million-dollar question. Would you know anyone who could authenticate this more officially? Josh asked. Mr. Green thought for a moment. Professor Daniels at State, Film History Department. He wrote a book on Golden Age Hollywood. If anyone can verify this, it's him. 2 days later, we were sitting in Professor Daniels' cluttered office at the university. Books about cinema history towered in precarious stacks. Framed movie posters competed for wall space with academic certificates. Professor Daniels was younger than I expected, maybe mid-50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and hands that moved constantly as he spoke. He seemed skeptical at first. You realize I get weekly emails from people claiming to have found lost footage of Chaplin, Valentino, or Monroe? He said, not unkindly. Everyone wants to believe they discovered buried treasure. But when we showed him the footage on the portable projector we brought, his demeanor changed completely. He leaned forward, eyes widening. Halfway through, he paused it and walked up to the makeshift screen, a white poster board propped against his bookshelf. This location, he said, pointing to the garden where Marilyn was walking. I recognize it. This is the backyard of the Benedict Canyon house, where she lived briefly in 1954. My skin prickled with goosebumps. So, it's definitely her? In her actual home? It certainly appears to be, he said, his academic caution wrestling with obvious excitement. The quality is remarkable. Most candid footage of her from this period is much grainier, shot on 8mm by amateurs. This is clearly professional 16mm work. He restarted the film, watching the rest with intense concentration. Your grandfather shot this? He asked when it finished. I nodded. Was he a professional cinematographer? Camera assistant. Mainly, he worked on Sing in the Rain and some other productions. Professor Daniels rubbed his beard thoughtfully. This would require proper authentication, film dating, provenance verification, expert analysis of her appearance compared to known photos from that time period. My heart sank a little. That sounded expensive and time-consuming. But, he continued, if authenticated, this would be of significant historical and cultural value. Collectors, archives, museums, they'd all be interested. Interested enough to pay? Josh blurted out. I shot him a look, but the professor didn't seem offended. Potentially, yes, quite substantially. He handed me his card. I have contacts at UCLA's Film Archive and the Academy Library. With your permission, I'd like to make some calls. I took the card, trying to keep my hand steady. How do we protect ourselves legally? This is my inheritance. I don't want to just hand it over and never see it again. Smart question, he nodded approvingly. Don't let anyone, and I mean anyone, take physical possession of that film without proper documentation and legal protection. Word spread faster than I could have imagined. Professor Daniels must have called someone who called someone else, because by the time I got back to Josh's place, my phone was blowing up with calls from numbers I didn't recognize. A film collector from Chicago, a memorabilia dealer from Las Vegas, someone claiming to represent a private Monroe collector in Japan. I didn't answer any of them, but the voicemails piled up, each offering more money than the last for first look rights at the footage. Dude, you're sitting on a gold mine, Josh said as we listened to the messages. That last guy offered $20,000 just to see it. I felt dizzy. $20,000 was more money than I'd ever seen in my life. It would pay for my first year of film school with plenty left over. But something didn't feel right about selling off Grandpa's legacy to the highest bidder. We need to be careful, I said. We don't even know the full story yet. The breaking point came when a self-described Maryland historian from New York called, his voice vibrating with intensity. I'll give you $10,000 and my entire collection of Marilyn Monroe dolls. I have over 300, including rare Japanese editions. Josh fell off the couch laughing when I played that voicemail for him. But beneath the absurdity, I felt a creeping unease. These people didn't care about my grandfather or his work. They just wanted a piece of Marilyn. Another fragment of a woman who'd been picked apart by fans and collectors for decades. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Grandpa Michael and what he would want me to do with his footage. Would he want it sold to some obsessive collector? Donated to an archive? Kept private? I was still mulling this over the next morning when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Dad. My finger hovered over the decline button, but something made me answer. "Tim, we need to talk about what you took." His voice was different, not angry but calculated. Cold. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "You mean what Grandpa legally left to me in his will?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've heard rumors about what's on those films." He continued as if I hadn't spoken, "that there's valuable footage, historical footage." I felt a chill. How did they know? Then it hit me. Small town, big gossip. Someone at the university must have talked. "That's my business," I said. "It's family business," he countered. "Those films should benefit all of us, not just you." I nearly dropped the phone. "All of us? You called them junk. You told me to throw them away. You kicked me out of the house over them." I could hear murmuring in the background. Then my uncle's voice, not quite muffled enough. "Tell him he stole them. We can get them that way." My blood went from cold to boiling in an instant. They were plotting against me, trying to find a way to take what they dismissed just days ago. "I didn't steal anything," I said, my voice shaking with anger. Grandpa's was clear. The projector and films were left to me specifically. "You're barely an adult, Tim," my father said, his tone softening into something almost reasonable. "You don't know how to handle something like this. Sell the films, come home, and we can split the money. We'll forget this whole thing happened." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After throwing me out, after dismissing Grandpa's legacy, now they want to cash in? Now the films were suddenly valuable family heirlooms instead of garage clutter? "Let me get this straight," I said, surprised at myself at how calm I sounded. "You thought these films were worthless junk. You made me choose between them and having a home. You literally told me to throw away my grandfather's life work. But the second you think there might be money involved, suddenly they're family property?" Silence on the other end. "You sold out Grandpa's memory for convenience of a cleaner garage." I continued, the words pouring out now. "Now you want to sell it again for cash. Not happening. Not ever." "Don't be dramatic, Tim," he started, but I cut him off. "I'm done talking. If you contact me again about this, it'll be through my lawyer." I hung up, hands trembling with adrenaline. I didn't have a lawyer. I couldn't afford a sandwich at Subway, let alone legal representation. But they didn't need to know that. Josh found me sitting in the garage, staring at the film canisters. "You okay? You look like you just saw a ghost." "My family wants the films now," I said, now that they might be worth something. Josh's usual joking demeanor vanished. "Seriously? That's messed up. They're saying I stole them. My uncle literally suggested they claim I took them without permission. Can they do that?" Josh asked, looking worried. "I don't think so. Grandpa's was pretty clear." I picked up the metal canister containing the Marilyn footage. "But they have resources I don't. They could make things difficult." Josh sat down beside me. "So what's the plan?" I thought about everything that had happened, from being thrown out of my home to discovering footage that could change my life, from my family's dismissal to their sudden greedy interest. "I need to protect this," I said finally. "Not just for me, but for Grandpa. He left these to me for a reason. He trusted me with them." I looked at the projector, old and battered, but still working after all these years. Just like Grandpa had kept working, kept believing in his Hollywood days when everyone around him dismissed him as fabrications. "They betrayed him twice," I said quietly. "First by treating his work like garbage, and now by trying to profit from it. I won't let that happen." Josh nodded, more serious than I'd ever seen him. "So what's the next move?" I took a deep breath. I need legal protection. I need to establish clear ownership. And I need to figure out exactly what I'm sitting on here, the full story behind these films. The weight of what I was facing settled on my shoulders. This wasn't just about some old movies anymore. This wasn't even just about film school or proving my family wrong. This was about protecting my grandfather's legacy from the very people who should have valued it most. Grandpa used to say that film shows us the soul. I told Josh, "I think I've just seen my family's souls, and they're darker than exposed film. Josh put his hand on my shoulder. Then it's war. I nodded, a plan already forming in my mind. I need lawyers. I need experts. I need proof. This wasn't the path I'd imagined when Grandpa left me his old projector, but it was a path I was on now, and I would follow it wherever it led, for him, for myself, and for the truth that was hiding somewhere in these reels of forgotten film. Finding a lawyer when you're broke, living in your friend's garage, and in possession of potentially valuable historical footage isn't as easy as it sounds. After calling around town and being quoted consultation fees that made my empty bank account weep, I was about to give up. Then Josh's mom came through with a name, Franklin Weber, an old law school friend who owed her a favor. He agreed to meet me pro bono, at least for the initial consultation. His office wasn't what I expected. Instead of mahogany and leather, it was all IKEA furniture and framed movie posters. Franklin himself looked more like a college professor than a lawyer, mid-50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a Star Wars tie. So, he said after I'd explained my situation, you have what might be previously unknown footage of Marilyn Monroe, legally willed to you by your grandfather, and now your family want a piece of the pie they initially threw in the trash? I nodded, clutching the manila envelope with Grandpa's will and the letter from his attorney. Franklin examined the documents, occasionally making small noises of interest. Finally, he set them down and removed his glasses. The will is clear-cut. Your grandfather specifically left these items to you, not to the family collectively. They have about as much legal claim to them as I do. Relief washed over me. So they can't take them? Not legally, no. But that doesn't mean they won't try to make your life difficult. He leaned forward. Have you had the footage authenticated yet? I told him about Professor Daniels and his cautious but excited assessment. Get that in writing, Franklin advised. And don't let the physical film out of your sight. We're talking about a unique cultural artifact here. If authenticated, this isn't just family drama. This is film history. As I was leaving, he added something that stuck with me. Your grandfather must have had a reason for keeping this footage private all these years. And for leaving it specifically to you. Think about that before you make any decisions. The media attention started the next day. Someone from a university must have leaked the story because a local news blog ran a headline. Local teen discovers lost Marilyn Monroe footage in inheritance. By afternoon, my phone was blowing up. Local TV stations, collectors, 2 different Hollywood memorabilia dealers. Someone claiming to represent a cryptocurrency billionaire who collects rare cultural artifacts. Josh thought it was hilarious. Dude, you're famous by proxy. This is like when my cousin went on a date with a guy who was an extra on The Walking Dead. I wasn't laughing. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, a feeding frenzy. These people didn't care about Grandpa Michael or his work. They just wanted a piece of Marilyn, the woman who'd been exploited and commodified for decades after her death. Then came the email from Warner Brothers, an actual Hollywood studio. They wanted to discuss acquisition rights for the footage, with the possibility of including it in an upcoming documentary about Golden Age Hollywood. HBO reached out the same day with a similar offer, adding that they'd be interested in my personal story as well. Josh found me in the garage that night, staring at the projector. You don't look like someone who just got emails from Warner Brothers and HBO, he observed, handing me a soda. Most film students would be doing backflips right now. I popped the can open, watching the fizz settle. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I'm getting calls from Hollywood executives. But it doesn't feel like it's because of me, you know? It's all about what I have, not who I am. Welcome to America, Josh said with a theatrical sigh. We're only as valuable as what you own or how many followers you have. He wasn't wrong. But something else was bothering me too. What if I sell the footage and it's the wrong choice? What if Grandpa kept it private all these years for a reason? What if I'm betraying his trust? Josh sat down on our makeshift couch, 2 folding chairs with a plank across them. Or what if he left it to you because he knew you'd do the right thing with it? Maybe the right thing is sharing it with the world. Before I could figure out my next move, my family made theirs. Uncle Rick called a family meeting at my parents' house, and made sure everyone in our extended family attended. Cousins, aunts, even my grandmother, who usually avoided family drama, were all there. I know this because Cousin Emma texted me about it. She and I had always been close, and she was disgusted by what went down. According to her, Uncle Rick stood in the living room and announced that I had taken advantage of Grandpa's declining mental state to manipulate him into leaving me valuable family artifacts. He said you knew all along there was something valuable on those reels. Emma's text read, said you've been planning to cash in and leave the family high and dry. My blood boiled reading her play-by-play. Uncle Rick had effectively painted me as a con artist who manipulated a dying old man. My father had apparently nodded along, backing him up. My mother had said nothing, her usual approach to conflict. Only Grandma Ruth had spoken up, asking why. If the films were so valuable, they'd been telling me to throw them away just days earlier. The family meeting was bad enough, but then came the whisper campaign around town. Our neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, cornered me outside the grocery store, asking if it was true I'd stolen family heirlooms. My former high school teacher gave me a disappointed look at the gas station and mumbled something about respecting family. In a small town like ours, reputation is currency, and mine was being systematically destroyed. The worst part came when my mother called, not to check if I was okay, not to apologize, but to say, just give the films back and all this can stop. We can be a family again. I still remember standing in Josh's driveway, phone pressed in my ear, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Be a family again? I echoed, my voice sounding strange in my own ears. When were we ever a family? When you all mocked Grandpa stories? When you called his legacy junk? When you kicked me out? Or now, when you think his films might be worth money? The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. You don't want to be with me, I continued, the truth settling into my bones. You want to be with the money. There's a difference. After that call, something in me hardened. I was done being reactive. It was time to take control of the narrative. With Franklin's legal guidance, I drafted clear terms for anyone interested in viewing or acquiring the footage. No physical access to the original film. Without signed contracts. Required presence of my legal representation. Non-disclosure agreements until authentication was complete. Professor Daniels helped arrange a meeting with film preservation experts from UCLA who could properly assess the footage without it leaving my possession. Meanwhile, Josh appointed himself my media firewall, screening calls and keeping reporters away from the house. He seemed to relish the role, answering the door in different ridiculous outfits each time, once in a fake mustache and smoking jacket, introducing himself as Tim's personal secretary, Montgomery Worthington III. You're enjoying this way too much, I told him after he chased away a particularly persistent local blogger. Hey, my best friend is at the center of a Hollywood mystery, he grinned. This is the most excitement our town has seen since the mayor got caught skinny dipping in the high school pool. Amidst the chaos, something unexpected happened. People started reaching out, not to get the footage, but to support me. Mr. Green from the Starlight Theater put up a sign saying, "Proud supporter of local film history," a not-so-subtle reference to my situation. 3 of my former teachers sent emails offering encouragement. Even Josh's normally aloof roommate started treating me like some kind of folk hero, bringing home extra food when they got takeout. The most surprising ally emerged in the form of letters, actual physical letters that began arriving from me care at Josh's address. Elderly people who'd worked in Hollywood during the same era as my grandfather. Film buffs who appreciated the historical significance of what might have been found. Even a few who claimed to have known my grandfather personally during his time in the industry. One letter in particular caught my attention from a 91-year-old former camera operator named Harold Fleming who wrote, "Your grandfather Michael wasn't just talented with a camera. He was one of the few decent men in a business full of sharks. Whatever you decide to do with his legacy, know that he was respected by those who actually understood the craft." Reading those words, something clicked into place. This wasn't just about me versus my family anymore. This wasn't even just about money or film school. This was about honoring not only what my grandfather left behind, but how he lived his life. I think I know what I need to do, I told Josh one night as we sat in the garage, the projector casting long shadows on the wall. Sell to the highest bidder and buy us matching Lamborghinis, he suggested hopefully. I'm going to show the footage on my terms, not skulking around in private viewings for wealthy collectors, but as a proper presentation of Grandpa's work. The plan came together over the next few days. With Franklin's help, I secured a small theater for a private screening. The Starlight, of course, with Mr. Green proudly offering for free. Professor Daniels would provide historical context. The UCLA preservation experts would be there to officially authenticate the footage, and I'd invite select media, as well as representatives from film archives and studios. The goal wasn't to auction off the footage to the highest bidder, but to find the right home for it. Somewhere it would be preserved, respected, and made available to researchers and film historians. As Josh put it, your family wanted to throw it in the trash. Then they wanted to cash in. You're finding a middle path, keeping it alive without selling out. 2 days before the scheduled screening, I received an unexpected text from Cousin Emma. They're planning something. Uncle Rick and your dad. I overheard them. Be careful. My stomach dropped. What could they possibly do? They had no legal claim. The screening was private property. Everything was above board. But I'd learned not to underestimate the lengths people will go to when money and pride are involved. Franklin advised hiring security for the event. Just as a precaution, Mr. Green suggested we make backup copies of the footage, just in case. The night before the screening, I couldn't sleep. Josh found me in the garage at 3 a.m., running the projector one last time, watching Marilyn laugh and twirl in that garden from so long ago. Having second thoughts? He asked, sitting beside me. No, I said, just making sure I'm doing right by her too. By everyone in these films. Josh watched the footage for a moment, then said something surprisingly profound for a guy whose usual philosophical contributions involved pizza toppings. Your family tried to make this about ownership, but maybe it was never meant to be owned. Maybe your grandpa was just keeping it safe until the right time. Morning came with nervous energy and a sense of purpose. We carefully packed the projector and all 5 reels of film. The authenticated footage of Marilyn was a centerpiece, but I decided to show excerpts from all the reels, even Aunt Marge and her pie. It was all part of Grandpa's legacy, all pieces of the story. Before leaving, I made a stop at First National Bank, where I'd rented a safety deposit box for the original Marilyn Monroe reel. Franklin had insisted on this precaution the moment the media attention started. Never keep all your eggs in one garage, he'd said with a wry smile. I've been bringing only a high-quality digital transfer to viewings, keeping the irreplaceable original film locked away. With the precious original reel now securely in my backpack, we loaded everything into Josh's car. I looked back at the garage that had been my refuge during this strange chapter of my life. Whatever happened today would change things. There was no going back to being just a kid with dreams of film school. I was now Tim Harlow, grandson of Michael Harlow, and I was about to share his hidden legacy with the world. For better or worse, the credits of my old life were rolling, and a new story was about to begin. The Starlight Theater hadn't seen a full house in years, but tonight, every seat was taken. Film historians from UCLA, representatives from Warner Brothers, Netflix, and 3 other studios, local media. Even Professor Daniels had brought his entire film history class. Mr. Green was running around like a kid at Christmas, checking the projection equipment for the 20th time. And in the back row, trying to look invisible but failing spectacularly, sat my family, Dad, Mom, Uncle Rick, and a few others who'd suddenly remembered they were related to me. I stood at the front of the theater, palms sweating as I gripped the podium. Public speaking had never been my thing, but Franklin had coached me through a brief introduction. Keep it simple. Focus on Grandpa Michael. Make this about film history, not family drama. My grandfather was a craftsman. I began, my voice steadier than I felt. He worked behind the scenes, making movie magic happen without getting credit on marquees. What you're about to see is a small part of the legacy he left behind, not just to me, but to cinema history. The lights dimmed. First came the singing in the rain behind-the-scenes footage. Murmurs of appreciation rippled to the crowd of film buffs. Then the seemingly mundane reels, Aunt Marge at her pie, the California landscapes, Grandpa with his lawnmower. These everyday moments might seem trivial, I narrated as they played, but they show the same eye for composition, the same respect for subject that made him valuable on professional sets. I could almost feel my family's confusion from the back row. Why was I showing this boring stuff? Where was the money shot? Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, the fifth reel. Marilyn. The theater went absolutely silent as she appeared on screen, adjusting her dress in that Benedict Canyon garden. The quality was stunning, professional, intimate, obviously shot with skill and care. Marilyn laughing, Marilyn thoughtful, Marilyn unguarded in a way rarely captured on film. Professor Daniels had helped me identify contextual clues that dated the footage precisely to July 1954, a very specific period in her life, when she was briefly living in that house between film projects. When the lights came up, the response was immediate. The UCLA preservation team practically surrounded me, talking rapidly about the historical significance and cultural importance of what they'd just seen. The studio representatives were more restrained but clearly interested, making polite small talk while clearly calculating numbers in their heads. A film historian I had met before clasped my hand with tears in her eyes. This is extraordinary. Not just another exploitation of her image. This shows her humanity. The real woman, not the icon. That comment struck me hard. It was exactly what I'd felt watching the footage the first time. The presentation evolved into a sort of impromptu reception in the theater lobby. Mr. Green had set up coffee and cookies, clearly thrilled to have his beloved Starlight at the center of attention. Josh worked the room like he was born for it, making introductions and keeping an eye on who was talking to whom. I was in the middle of a conversation with the UCLA team when I saw them approaching. My family, moving as a unit toward me like a storm front. Franklin appeared at my side, as if sensing danger. "Remember," he murmured, "you don't have to engage if you don't want to." But I did want to. After everything, I wanted to face them directly. My father spoke first, his businessman smile firmly in place. "Tim, this is quite an achievement. We're very proud." The words rang so hollow I almost laughed. Proud? Now, after everything? Uncle Rick chimed in. "The family has been discussing how to handle the proceeds. We think setting up a trust will be the most tax efficient." Franklin cleared his throat. "Any proceeds belong solely to Tim, as the legal heir to these artifacts, as established by his grandfather's will." What happened next was both shocking and utterly predictable. My father turned to the nearest cluster of journalists and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "My son manipulated his dying grandfather for personal gain. These films belong to our entire family." The room went silent. Every head turned our way. My heart hammered in my chest. Uncle Rick seized a moment, stepping forward dramatically. "We're asking for a fair division. Half the proceeds to Tim, half to the rest of the family. That's all we want." I looked at their faces, the naked greed barely concealed behind fake concern. These people who had mocked Grandpa's Hollywood stories, who had called his legacy junk, who had thrown me out of my home for refusing to trash his memory. I was about to respond when Professor Daniels stepped forward. "Excuse me," he said mildly, "but I believe I just heard you say these films were junk, not worth keeping?" Because I distinctly remember Tim telling me his family insisted these films were worthless and should be thrown away. Is that correct? The local reporter from the Tribune, who'd been covering the story from the beginning, chimed in. "And didn't you evict your son when he refused to discard these historical artifacts?" I believe we reported on that. My family's plan collapsed like a bad souffle. They hadn't expected the journalists to know the backstory, hadn't realized I'd been transparent about the whole journey from the beginning. My father's face darkened. Uncle Rick sputtered something about family matters. My mother looked at the floor. I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. The offers started coming in the next morning. Warner Brothers. $5 million for exclusive rights to the Marilyn footage, plus a first-look deal on any other Discover materials. Netflix. $3 million for a documentary about Grandpa Michael's career and my discovery of the lost footage. There were smaller offers, too. Film archives wanting to preserve the materials. museums requesting exhibition rights, collectors offering slightly less money but promising to keep the collection intact. The numbers were staggering, life-changing. Just days ago, I couldn't afford my own apartment. Now I was fielding multi-million-dollar offers. Josh found me sitting on our makeshift couch in the garage, staring at the projector. "So," he said, dropping beside me, "which mansion are we buying?" "I vote for one with a bowling alley." I smiled weakly. "I don't know what to do, man. It's so much money." "It's not just money," Josh said, suddenly serious. "It's validation. Your grandfather wasn't making stuff up. He really was part of Hollywood history. And you saved that history when your own family wanted to trash it." After a week of negotiations and consultations with Franklin, I made my decisions. I accepted Warner Brothers' offer, with strict conditions about how the footage could be used and requirements for proper historical context. I signed with Netflix for the documentary, insisting on creative input to ensure Grandpa's story was told respectfully. I set up a film preservation foundation with part of the proceeds, aimed at saving forgotten footage from Hollywood's golden age. Established a scholarship for aspiring camera operators at UCLA Film School. Bought a modest but nice house in Los Angeles, with a proper screening room where Grandpa's projector now sits in a place of honor. And my family, they got nothing. When the check cleared, Dad called to say they were reconsidering legal options. I listened silently, then said, "You called it junk. You threw it away. You threw me away with it. What's in my bank account may be new, but my memory isn't that short." The Netflix documentary premiered 6 months later to rave reviews. Film buffs were fascinated by the story of Grandpa Michael, the unsung camera assistant who had quietly preserved a slice of Hollywood history. The Marilyn footage, used respectfully and sparingly, was just one part of a larger story about the people behind the camera during cinema's golden age. The most surreal moment came when I was accepted to UCLA Film School, the same program I'd been dreaming of before all this happened. Only now I wasn't a scholarship kid struggling to pay tuition. I was that guy who found the lost Marilyn footage, walking through the same halls where they now taught about my grandfather's work. Life moves faster than the 24 frames per second reel sometimes. Josh still gives me grief about going Hollywood, especially since I bought him that vintage Mustang he'd always wanted as a thank you for letting me crash in his garage. Last week, I sat alone in my screening room, running Grandpa's old projector, not the Marilyn footage. That's safely preserved in climate-controlled storage at UCLA now. Just the ordinary reels. Aunt Marge and her pie. California landscapes from a car window. Grandpa mowing the lawn and waving at the camera. The simple moments that seemed so worthless to everyone else. The pieces of life that didn't make headlines or attract million-dollar offers. I watched the light flickering through the film, creating that magic that happens when still images run fast enough to create the illusion of movement, of life. Grandpa Michael used to tell me, film is eternity captured on celluloid. I didn't fully understand what he meant until now. It's not about fame or fortune. It's not even about being remembered by strangers. It's about preserving moments that would otherwise be lost to time, whether it's Marilyn Monroe laughing in a garden or just an old man waving from across his lawn. The money is nice, sure. I won't pretend it isn't. But what matters more is that when I look at that old projector, I can still hear Grandpa's voice telling me stories from a Hollywood that no longer exists. That connection is worth more than all the millions in my bank account. In the end, wealth is just a bonus. The real inheritance was never about the monetary value of some old film reels. It was about honoring memories and having the wisdom to recognize treasure when others only see trash.